The Facebook post that destroyed my civilian life was 8 words long. Some battles you fight, some battles find you. I'd uploaded it with a photo from my deployment to Fallujah, nothing classified. Just me and my squad standing next to our Humvee after a routine patrol. Standard veteran social media stuff. A moment of pride, a small acknowledgement of service, the kind of thing thousands of former soldiers post every day without consequence. Within 6 hours, I was called into HR at Morrison Tech Solutions, where I'd worked as a cybersecurity analyst for 3 years. Susan Chun, the director, sat across from her mahogany desk with a printed copy of my post and an expression that suggested I'd committed a war crime. "Marcus," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "we need to discuss your social media presence." "What?" "About it. This post, the militaristic imagery, the aggressive tone. Several employees have expressed concern about having someone with your gown in the workplace." I stared at her. "My background? You mean my service record? The one you were perfectly fine with when you hired me? That was different. This is about creating a hostile work environment. Some of our staff feel threatened by displays of military culture. Threatened by a picture of soldiers?" Susan pulled out another sheet of paper. "We've also received complaints about your previous posts. References to brotherhood and honor that some interpret as exclusionary language. Comments about civilians not understanding that create an us versus them mentality." My blood pressure spiked. "I've never said anything against civilians. I've never been anything but professional here. Marcus, we're a progressive company. We pride ourselves on creating an inclusive environment for all employees. Military culture, with its emphasis on hierarchy, aggression, and violence, is incompatible with our values." Military culture? I helped design the cybersecurity system that protects this company's data. I've trained half your IT department. I've never been violent or aggressive toward anyone here. Nevertheless, we've decided it's best if we part ways. We're prepared to offer a generous severance package, contingent on your agreement not to discuss the circumstances of your departure. They were firing me for posting a photo of my military service, for acknowledging a part of my life that had defined me for 8 years. "This is discrimination," I said. "This is a private company exercising its right to maintain workplace standards. You're welcome to consult an attorney, but I think you'll find our position is legally sound." I took the severance package because I needed the money and because fighting a tech company with unlimited legal resources seemed futile, but the humiliation burned. 3 years of exemplary performance, countless late nights fixing their security vulnerabilities, and they'd thrown me away like garbage because some 20-something programmers felt uncomfortable about working with a veteran. The story didn't end there. Someone at Morrison Tech leaked the details to social media, painting me as a toxic veteran who'd been creating a hostile environment with militant behavior. The narrative spread like wildfire through the local tech community's Twitter feeds, and LinkedIn posts #ToxicVeteran started trending in our city's social media circles. Screenshots of my Facebook posts were shared with commentary about military brainwashing and violent masculinity. My LinkedIn profile was flooded with comments, calling me a baby killer and a fascist. I became a case study in everything wrong with veteran culture, a symbol of how military training produces broken men who can't adapt to civilized society. My deployment photos were reposted with captions like, "This is what trauma looks like, and why we need better mental health screening." The irony was suffocating. I'd never talked about combat, never posted anything about weapons or violence, never shared the dark stories that actually haunted my dreams. Just photos of camaraderie, references to service, expressions of pride in something that had shaped my character in ways these people would never understand. But the internet had decided I was the villain, and the internet is rarely interested. In nuance, that I spent 3 months unemployed, watching my savings dwindle, while HR departments across the city quietly blacklisted me. Every interview ended the same way: polite interest, until they Googled my name and found the social media storm. Then suddenly the position was filled, or they decided to go in a different direction. The isolation was worse than the financial stress. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Even at the VA hospital, other veterans looked at me strangely, like I'd somehow betrayed the fraternity by becoming a public embarrassment. I considered leaving town, starting over. Somewhere, my Google results wouldn't follow me. But running felt like surrendering, and 8 years in the Marines had beaten the concept of surrender out of me. That's when I got the message from at truthseeker_47. It came through Facebook Messenger at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday when I was lying awake, scrolling through job listings that might as well have been written in a foreign language. Marcus, I've been following your story. I think there's more to it than what's been reported. Would you be willing to talk? I checked the profile. Sarah Martinez, freelance journalist, specializing in veteran affairs and military accountability. Her feed was full of investigative pieces about PTSD treatment, VA corruption, and veteran employment discrimination. I'd been burned by media attention before local news had run a segment about my firing that painted Morrison Tech as progressive. Heroes standing up to military culture. But something about Sarah's approach felt different, more genuine. We met at a diner outside the city, away from the tech crowd that had made me infamous. Sarah was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of intense focus that suggested she actually listened when people talked. "Tell me about Fallujah," she said after we'd ordered coffee. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Your deployment, your unit, what you actually did there. Because I've been digging into your service record, and what I've found doesn't match the narrative being spread about you." I was hesitant at first. 3 months of public humiliation had made me cautious about trusting anyone with my story. But Sarah asked the right questions, showed genuine understanding of military culture, and demonstrated knowledge of Iraq operations that suggested she'd done real research. So I told her about the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, about 8 months in Fallujah during the worst of the insurgency, about patrols through streets where every window could hide a sniper and every pile of trash could hide an eye. But she kept pushing for details about one specific operation. November 15th, 2006. A date I'd spent 15 years trying to forget. Marcus. I found references to Operation Silent Thunder in several classified documents that were recently declassified through FOIA requests. Your unit was involved in something significant that day, something that never made it into public records. My hands started shaking. The coffee cup rattled against the saucer. "I can't talk about that." "Why not?" "Because some things are classified." "For good reasons." Sarah leaned forward. "Marcus, whatever happened that day, it's being used against you now. People are calling you a killer without knowing what you actually did. Don't you think the truth might be worth telling?" I stared out the diner window at the traffic on Highway 101, but all I could see was a dusty street in Fallujah and the faces of people I couldn't save. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me." So I told her about the house on Tal Afar Street, about the intel that suggested insurgents were holding American hostages, 3 contractors who'd been captured during an ambush 2 weeks earlier, about the mission briefing that emphasized speed and silence above all else. Told her about breaching the compound at 0300, expecting to find armed fighters and getting instead a scene from hell. 12 Iraqi civilians chained in the basement bin. Women, children who'd been tortured for information about American troop movements. The contractors we'd come to rescue were already dead, executed days earlier, but the civilians were alive. Barely. The operation was supposed to be search and destroy, I explained to Sarah. Eliminate the insurgent cell, recover any intelligence, extract. Mission parameters didn't include civilian rescue, but you rescued them anyway. My squad leader, Sergeant Rodriguez, made the call. Said we couldn't leave those people to die. So we spent 4 hours extracting 12 Iraqi civilians from that basement, calling in medevac, getting them to the field hospital. Sarah took notes while I talked, asking questions about details I'd buried so deep I was surprised I could still access them. What happened afterward? Command was furious. We'd blown operational security, exposed tactical methods, created a diplomatic incident. The Iraqis we rescued started talking to journalists about American soldiers who'd saved them from insurgent torture. It contradicted the narrative about Iraqi civilian casualties. So they classified the whole operation, completely, sealed the after-action reports, transferred our squad to different units, ordered everyone involved never to discuss operational details. As far as the official record was concerned, Operation Silent Thunder never happened. But the people you saved, they remembered, for a while. Then they started disappearing. Car bombs, assassinations, mysterious accidents. Insurgents don't like collaborators, and being rescued by Americans made them targets. Sarah's pen stopped moving. How many survived? 3, maybe 4. Last I heard, 2 had made it to refugee camps in Jordan. We sat in silence for several minutes. The weight of 12 lives saved and 8 lives lost, of heroism that had been classified and buried, of sacrifice that would never be acknowledged. Marcus, Sarah finally said, do you understand what you've just told me? You and your squad violated direct orders to save Iraqi civilians. You risked court-martial to prevent a massacre. And the military buried the story because it was politically inconvenient. We were just doing what was right. And now you're being destroyed by people who think you're a baby killer, while the actual heroes who saved lives are forced to stay silent. Sarah spent 3 weeks verifying my account. She tracked down Rodriguez, who'd retired to New Mexico and been fighting his own battles with PTSD and unemployment. She found Williams and Chun, 2 other squad members who'd been present during the rescue. She located one of the Iraqi survivors, now living in Amman, Jordan, who provided detailed testimony about the American soldiers who'd risked their lives. To save civilians from insurgent torture, she obtained declassified portions of the operation, reports through Freedom of Information Act requests, documents that confirmed the basic timeline even if they couldn't reveal specific details. Most importantly, she found the congressional testimony from General Patterson, who'd been asked about civilian casualties in Fallujah, and had specifically referenced instances where American forces went above and beyond to protect non-combatant lives, often at great personal risk. The story ran in the Washington Post on a Wednesday morning in March. The classified heroes, how veterans who saved lives are being silenced by military secrecy. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, my LinkedIn profile was flooded with messages of support instead of condemnation. The hashtag Toxic Veteran hashtag was replaced with hashtag Classified Heroes, as people shared stories of military personnel who'd risked everything to protect civilians. Morrison Tech's stock price dropped 3% as investors questioned a company culture that would fire someone for their military service. Several major clients canceled contracts, citing concerns about the company's values. Susan Chun called me personally to offer my job back with a promotion and a formal apology. I declined. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Instead, I accepted a position with Veteran Advocacy Solutions, a nonprofit that helps former military personnel navigate discrimination and employment challenges. The salary was lower than Morrison Tech, but the mission was something I could believe in. The real victory came 6 months later, When Congress passed the Veteran Employment Protection Act, legislation specifically addressing discrimination against former military personnel in civilian workplaces. Sarah's article had sparked a national conversation about how we treat the people who'd served their country. I testified before the House Veterans Affairs Committee about my experience, sharing the story of Operation Silent Thunder publicly for the first time. The hearing was broadcast on C-SPAN, and within hours, I was receiving messages from Iraqi refugees around the world, people whose lives had been touched by American soldiers who'd chosen to do the right thing instead of the easy thing. One message particularly moved me. It came from Amira Hassan, one of the women we'd rescued from that basement in Fallujah. Mr. Marcus, I want you to know that I named my daughter Sarah after the journalist who told your story. And my son is named Marcus after the soldier who saved my life. They will grow up knowing that not all Americans are warriors, but the best Americans are heroes. The Facebook post that had started everything was still online, still generating occasional comments. But now the responses were different. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice. Heroes don't need to brag. Real heroes stay humble. Some battles you fight, some battles find you, and some heroes save lives while keeping the secrets. They took away my uniform when I finished my enlistment in 2008. It couldn't take away my memories of that basement in Fallujah, of 12 people who lived because American Marines chose to risk everything for strangers. They tried to take away my reputation, my career, my place in civilian society. But they couldn't take away the truth. And sometimes, when you're patient enough and lucky enough to find the right journalist, the truth has a way of surfacing. I still work for Veteran Advocacy Solutions. I still help former military personnel fight discrimination and find meaningful employment. I still carry the memories of Operation Silent Thunder, but now they're not a burden. They're a reminder that heroism often happens in classified shadows, performed by people who will never receive public recognition. Sarah and I stayed in touch. She won a Pulitzer Prize for her series on veteran employment discrimination, using my case as the foundation for a broader investigation into how American society treats its former warriors. She's working on a book now about classified military operations where American forces protected civilians. Stories that will never be fully declassified. Heroism that will never be officially acknowledged. Sacrifice that exists only in the memories of the people who were there. My chapter is titled, The Basement on Tal Afar Street. It tells the story of 12 Iraqi civilians who lived because 4 American Marines decided that orders are important, but humanity is more important. They took away my uniform. They couldn't take my memories. And they sure as hell couldn't take away the fact that sometimes doing the right thing is more important than following the rules.